My name is Jasmine, for those of you who don't know. Um, and this is a webinar by the Capitalism Can't Be Fixed campaign. So this is a Canada-wide campaign rooted in socialism, justice, and activism. The title of today's webinar is Emailing the Police is Not a Crime, Zionist Lawfare and Suppression of Dissent. We have three speakers tonight. Um, Eve Engler, who is an activist and author of 13 books. John Philpott is a senior criminal litigation attorney and member of the Barreau du Québec since 1984. And Barbara Bedant is the executive director of Defend the Movement Quebec, the first movement law clinic of its kind in the province. So this webinar is a response to a growing trend of Zionist lawfare, which are coordinated legal and bureaucratic tactics by Zionist organizations and allies intended to intimidate, silence, and punish critics of Israel. This is happening across the Western world. Legal systems are increasingly being used for political purposes, particularly including the criminalization of protest and dissent. Rather than using the legal system to go after war criminals, for example, returning from Gaza, activists protesting genocide are the ones facing the full weight of the legal system. So I'll turn it over to Eve to tell us the background of his case.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, everyone. There's some little bit of a pause delay because the two different rooms, the mesh, these two different Zoom rooms, you can't have them both open at the same time. But yeah, I guess I'll just begin with my case, the basics of my case, and then a bit of the broader politics, and then I'll leave it up to the lawyers to get into a bit more the nitty-gritty. So a year ago, I was called by a Montreal hate crimes unit investigator and asked to come to the police station the next day to be charged with harassing Dahlia Kurtz, who is a prominent anti-Palestinian social media influencer. And I never have met Dahlia Kurtz. I have never talked to Dahlia Kurtz. I have never messaged Dahlia Kurtz. I've never threatened Dahlia Kurtz. All I've ever done was respond, and I don't even follow her on X. All I ever did was respond to her messages on X. And I will grant, often with biting political commentary, but again, never threatening, always with a sort of like, maybe snarky in some cases, hard line political positions, but entirely political. Nothing of a threatening nature. Dahlia Kurtz never blocked me. She just never did with the simple thing she could do. If she didn't want to have me be able to respond to her on X, which is just to block me. She did make some threat 6 or 8 months before that on X saying, stop responding to me. I find this threatening, or something to that effect on her X about she quote tweeted me with something I'd tweeted like a week or 10 days earlier with a message like that. Now, the police officer, they wanted to impose a condition on my release. And she said initially that I would be released immediately. I'd, go in, they'd fingerprint me, they'd take my information, and I'd be out in, I think she said 15 minutes or something to that effect. But they wanted it so I could not mention Dahlia Kurtz. Effectively, I couldn't mention the case against me. I did not accept that, of course. And I later that day I wrote about it, that the cops were going to arrest me for tweets, and I asked people to email as part of an Action Network email petition campaign the Montreal police investigator to say, one, drop this charge or drop this condition, this odious condition that is basically restricting my freedom of expression, and two, drop the charges. Uh, Later, I think it was posted in the evening. There were thousands of emails, about 2,000, 1,500, something like that, by the next morning when the police officer opened their phone. Within about an hour and a half into the day, they already had a filter on the police investigators' um, email inbox, and effectively the emails were all going into a mass account, and she wasn't even seeing them in her inbox. Um, Now, I ended up spending 5 days in jail before getting in front of a judge to have the condition thrown out. I was willing to accept other conditions, which were like I couldn't see Dahlia Kurtz. I couldn't. There was a couple other conditions. It had to do with also the police investigator. Now, when I wrote about this and when there was this email petition campaign, the police's response was to bring in three charges against me for harassing the police, interfering in police affairs, and violent communication. And so that's what they did. The next day, they brought in three more charges, and I ultimately spent 5 days in jail in a bid to defeat this condition, restricting my ability to talk about the case. So that was essentially an illegal condition. The charges around Dahlia Kurtz were subsequently abandoned in the summer. So the initial demand of the email campaign, the drop the condition and drop the charges, both actually were founded in law. They both got abandoned or dropped. But the police continued with these three charges that I was essentially harassing or intimidating the police. And unfortunately, a judge a bit over a month ago actually found me guilty on these three charges. And I think the John and Barbara will get into more detail on the implications of it, but it has quite negative implications for our right to petition the police. It has negative implications for broader right to petition state officials. A few things in understanding this. First of all, people petition the police. I was thinking about this, talking to this with Alex Terrell yesterday, the day before. We were assuming that people petition the Montreal police every single day, probably multiple times a day. There's someone who will say, we want this speed bump better enforced in my neighborhood, or there's somebody who has been stealing something from my store, and we want the police to come look at it. Most of it would obviously be one individual contacting the police in one way or another, but sometimes I would imagine not irregularly, there would be some form of like a local, community association or something saying, "Oh, there's problems at the local park. We need the police to pay more attention to the local park." There would be, I think, and I can't prove this, but I would assume many type petition campaigns in one form or another. Maybe not as effective as the one that we promoted, but this is not an uncommon thing. So the implications of that, I think, are quite vast. The way the police did it at the court was to suggest that the scale, because we hit a certain number, ultimately around 4,000 people emailed the police, because it hit that scale, it became intimidating, harassment, entrave, and that, what is the scale? Is the scale 50 emails? Is it 1,000 emails? Is it 4,000? There's these questions that would obviously come up. Um, Now, I think the bigger picture here is that Jasmine highlighted, and this is I think the more important picture. I think the state repressiveness, the Montreal Police's reaction is an important question, but I think the bigger picture here is that there is a live stream genocide. Maybe the killing is not quite as horrible as it was, 5 months ago, but even during a ceasefire, Israel continues to kill many every single day. And when this happened, this was the height of the mass killing that was taking place in Gaza. And as Jasmine pointed out, they're not enforcing the War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity Act. for Canadians, and we know it's 1,500 Canadians who fought in Gaza or in the Israeli military, many of whom have fought in Gaza recently. They're not enforcing the Foreign Enlistment Act, where it's a crime to induce Canadians to join another country's military. But we know there are institutions in this country, in this city, and across the country, and individuals who are in one way or another engaged in inducing Canadians to join the Israeli military. So that's the big picture, the double standard of application of law in this context. But then when we get into it and we start looking at like some of the cases, right? We know here in Montreal, Samar Al-Kur, whose daughter was killed in Gaza, she was protesting at Mark Miller's office, and Mark Miller, who's then the immigration minister, they were able to charge three of them for protesting. Ultimately, the video came out and they dropped the charges. But Samar and I believe two others ended up, Ned and I believe another, ended up in jail for, again, with the conditions, trying to defeat the conditions. That's one example. There's an example of Davide, I'm forgetting his last name, where there was protests in front of Mark Miller's office, and there was a call to email the office around you know Palestinians in Gaza coming to Canada, and he used the term blow up, right? Which was meant in the sense of blow up with blow up their email account, blow up the phone, and the police, possibly because of a mistranslation, but they took it in the sense of blow up in a arms kind of sense. And ultimately, he had to go through like I think almost a year of stuff. I think they ultimately abandoned the charges, but same kind of dynamic. So there's all this focus on those of us who are opposing genocide being targeted. And then you go broader, right? You look at this story in Ottawa of Diana Sheriff, who and I apologies if it's mispronunciation. She was accused for a whistle, having a whistle, and I think she was found guilty. That a whistle at a demonstration was viewed as a weapon. That's what they were pursuing her. We have this stuff in Toronto, which is probably the best detailed, where the Toronto police, with their Project Resolute, and they boosted the hate crimes unit drastically amidst the genocide in Gaza. And there's been a real targeting of Palestine people. Of course, the case of the Indigo 19, who got all charged for putting up posters on the window of Indigo, and they turned this into some big, dangerous, like, knock down doors at 6 a.m. and stuff like that. So this is all happening, and I should say, in my case, it is an investigator that begins this whole process in the hate crimes unit. I haven't had a chance to look in depth into Montreal Police's hate crimes unit, but from my understanding, it began in 2016. When I did a quick search, the Zionist groups have been pushing for greater resources to the hate crimes unit. I would, and I do hope someone has the time to do a deep dive and maybe even access to information these questions. But I would venture to guess that the hate crimes unit has been, brought to the Montreal Holocaust Museum, possibly even gone to Israel. Maybe not, but possibly even some. But certainly, like Montreal Holocaust Museum, there's a whole process of trying to influence the hate crimes unit in a way to make it look at the question from the lens of a Zionist kind of perspective. And so then we got, the bubble zones and the different cities, the push for the bubble zones. And that's one of the most clear. And then even at the federal level now, the Carney government is trying to introduce the bubble zones, restricting protests at community centers, religious institutions, and others in direct response to the Palestine solidarity, targeting Israeli soldiers speaking at a synagogue, or land theft sales at a community center, or whatnot. And in the most egregious example of that repression that we've seen is the listing of Samidoun, Palestinian Political Prisoners Network, as a listed terrorist organization. This is a Vancouver-based grassroots organization that basically overnight, without any evidence ever being presented, was found to be is basically defined as a criminal organization, and you can't have anything to do with it. It's not that dissimilar to tomorrow, the McCartney government saying that Montreal for Palestine is a terrorist organization. No one claimed that Samidoun had any involvement in any violence. No, not even the most extreme Zionists. The only claim was that they had connections to the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, which itself is a banned organization, and therefore they were banning them. So, if I had connections to Samidoun, can I then be right, or whatever organization, if Montreal for Palestine had connections to Samidoun, could then you ban Samidoun or Montreal for Palestine on the basis that they had connections to Samidoun? So it is a dangerous climate, and that is again all in the context of Canada largely failing to apply its own laws vis-a-vis Israel when it comes to the Foreign Enlistment Act, when it comes to the War Crimes Against Humanity Act, when it comes to Canada Revenue Agency rules around registered charities, when it comes to the Export-Import Act with regards to selling weapons to countries involved in significant violations, human rights violations abroad. So this is the climate, and I think this case is just one of hundreds into the thousands of people in this country over the past 2.5 years who've been lost their job, gone to jail, been targeted in some significant different way, kicked out of university for opposing Canadian complicity in genocide. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eve. Yeah, that's really good context on your file, but then also everything that's happening across the country. So next I'll pass it off to John. Just ask you to unmute there.
Well, you've said a lot of it. I'm a lawyer, and I'm supposed to respect the legal system and the police in some way, but it's very hard to respect them. Um, the prosecution took the charges against Eve after Dahlia Kurtz and Oberman, her lawyer. It started, she started March or April or May the year before, and then it continued in the summer. And the police the police knew there was no direct contact. And harassment means some kind of direct or indirect contact. In other words, if I tell Barbara to go after Eve, that's harassing Eve if I repeat it or I do it in a harassing manner. There was no indirect direct contact, and they knew it. So they just putting on the pressure, and Oberman, who was a conservative candidate in the last elections, finally wrote again in December, and he got the charges laid 2 months later. And they knew it wasn't. They knew that there was no contact. So that's irresponsible by the police and irresponsible by the prosecution service, who's supposed to look at cases and screen them. But it's their job, right? So they do it okay on some things. So, and then they ended up dropping the charges in June, but they should never have laid them, right? Now, the other thing, which is that it's common. I didn't even know the case that we're talking about, Banville. But when Eve wanted to, they called Eve in, and I told the policewoman, I said, no, we wouldn't accept that condition because he can talk about this, and he never talked to her, and he can talk about his case. It's public. And I told her, and the police, she deals with this all the time. I've dealt with her before in other cases. She should have known. She had to know that muzzling Eve is illegal under the jurisprudence of Banville, where a judge took it on and really explained that you can talk about your cases. All right. So that's really shocking. And so they tried to impose this on Eve. And then Eve's followers wrote this letter and was very polite. And the headings had dropped the charges, but in the inside of it, they said, don't impose illegal conditions. And it seems to me they're asking for justice and not obstructing justice, right? Asking for justice. And that's one of the things we're going to try and say very clearly in our appeal. We have to be careful because In our legal system, some of it's okay, some of it's not okay, but we have to fight and do this right. Um, and that's why Barbara and I are going to work on this very hard. So to me, it's like it was. I'm just going to stop my phone. Okay, sorry. To me, it was very shocking to see this, and then I was very disappointed by the judge because she said obstructing police. Obstructing police means making their work harder. That's what it comes down to, making their work harder, not making so they can't do their work. Interfering with an arrest. You can't do that, right? I mean, it's just not right, I guess. Maybe we want to sometimes, but you're not supposed to. And they said, well, Eve's letter writing made the work harder for that policewoman. How would Eve know that they had inferior computers? I don't know. Like, how could they know that? And so it's shocking. And then the judge, unfortunately, and I disagree with her, stated that all the people had to do was sign the letter. Well, I'm sorry, but people who sign letters read first. And what they signed, I think, was right, even if it wasn't right or partly right, but they were right. And so this is really disappointing. And so I'm very disappointed in the judge who doesn't seem, I don't know, we'll see on appeal how it goes. And we have a big job ahead of us. But I was very disappointed by the ruling. And we're going to take this all the way. And I'm optimistic within reason. Nothing is guaranteed in this world, especially in 2026 with all the illegal wars and things happening now and the war on Iran, which is totally illegitimate, total violation of the Nuremberg principles of the Nuremberg. So we are in a world where nothing is understandable. And Eve mentioned other cases where, I mean, I'm involved in several cases and where I'm not going to get into them now, but they always choose to go after the Palestinian or pro-Palestinian people. And this is going to be a big fight. Eve works with Just Peace Advocates. I'm on the board of Just Peace Advocates. We get consulted all the time. The exercise of free speech is one of the major challenges we have right now in this world, in this present world we live in. It's worse, actually, it's worse in Ontario than I think it's worse than, but here we got this big problem now. And the exercise of free speech cannot be punished unless I say kill somebody, which I'm not saying, of course, or throw somebody in the river, the St. Lawrence. Well, of course, you can't do that. But the rest is open and we can say it. Even things I don't agree with. So, and Dahlia Kurtz, well, I'm contradicting myself. She was close to racist speech. All right. She was really shocking. And Eve knows her better than I do because I didn't follow her. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I think what you said about free speech is very true. And I think that hate symbols as well is something that they're going after. So I think we might be seeing more of that, trying to classify maybe Palestinian flags or different symbols of solidarity movements as hate speech. All right, so our next speaker is Barbara. I'll ask you to unmute.
Okay, hi everyone. So I think that Eve and John have really covered a lot of terrain. This is a really important case, and I'm really glad that there is so much interest in it. Like Eve said, I mean, the context that's really important to keep in mind is that, Israel has been doing an attack on civilians and that they've been committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And there is a large segment of the population who wants to express their disapproval of this. And we're finding that there is this kind of use of different laws and legal rules to suppress that protest. So this is a real problem. And we see it in different ways. Obviously, in this case, they have been using the sections of the criminal code, such as harassment and obstruction of police work and obstruction of justice, in order to try to suppress the right to express disapproval. But at the same time, those sections are being used in other cases as well regarding pro-Palestinian protesters. So it's a real concern for us, the increasing use of criminal laws to suppress protest. And that's why this appeal is really, really important. So one of the things that we're appealing, one of the grounds is the fact that, first of all, it doesn't make sense that Eve was found guilty both of obstructing justice and obstructing police work. Because there's overlap between those two crimes, and there's the law in Canada that you're not supposed to multiply charges for if there's just like one fact situation. So this is one thing that we're highlighting. We're also really concerned that, this is overkill, right? It's like they are trying to just go after protesters with as many charges as possible. And so, we need to push back on that. Otherwise, we're concerned that the police and the prosecutor are going to continue to weaponize the criminal code against activists. There's also this whole issue, like if you look at the way that these crimes are worded in the criminal code, it says that there needs to be an intent to harass or an intent to obstruct. And the judge in this case, I mean, she didn't address that at all. Because there is zero proof that Eve intended to harass the police. And so her failure to look at that particular element of the crime, we say is an error. So that's another one of our grounds for appeal. But of course, like the most important grounds for appeal is the fact that there is a violation of Eve's freedom of speech here. So, basically he stated something on social media, and then people replied to it and they took action. As Eve mentioned, what he stated was grounded in law. He said, that this condition was unreasonable, and it is. In law, it's been held to be unreasonable, even in other cases. And he also asked that the charges be dropped. So basically he was saying that there is no basis for the criminal charge, and he was right. The charge was dropped. So he wasn't saying anything on social media that was not right. And nevertheless, they charged him for that speech. So, and this is in the context of this condition, trying to muzzle him, trying to say you're not allowed to talk about your case. And that too is a violation of the freedom of speech. So we see that there's layers here of the violation of our constitutional rights. And, this often happens at times like this, where we're facing multiple crises in the world. And so people want to express themselves. And so the state, they try to suppress those voices. Another thing I think that's really important about this case is that what Eve did is something that is often done, like email campaigns is a really important part of activism. It's a way for the public to express themselves. It's part of our democracy. It's not perfect. Our democracy isn't perfect because it's in the capitalist realm. And so obviously, those with more money have more of a voice. And then this is one of the ways to counter that is using social media and using email campaigns. And so the fact that this case is now saying that these email campaigns could be crimes is really of great concern, because we're worried not only that actions like this will qualify as crimes in the future, but we're also worried that there's going to be a chilling effect. So even for other instances where it might be so-called safer, an email campaign for a member of parliament or an email campaign for, the mayor or whatever, we're concerned that people will think twice. They'll be worried that they won't know because people don't often know the intricacies of when something could be a crime or not. And so there's going to be this kind of reaction, this people will be conservative about doing email campaigns. And so that's why, Eve and his legal team, we're very determined to work our best to get this judgment set aside.
Yeah, thank you so much to both of you for talking and doing this. It's definitely very important. So I guess we can open it up to any questions that anyone may have. We'll just ask that you keep them fairly brief. So I see that Michael Goodman has raised his hand, so I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi, thank you. Greetings from Vancouver. In the mid 1980s, I was part of a group called the Vancouver Peace Flotilla, and we sailed out into the harbor trying to make a point of nuclear warheads being in the Vancouver harbor. And the RCMP essentially attacked us. And one boat drifted into a warship, and they charged the operator of the vessel with poor operation of the vessel. I forgot the term. And so we had to go out and find a lawyer and go through the whole thing, and took all the energy of the group away. And they were also part of the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist. So that kind of split the group apart while we tried to defend the charges. So I'm just drawing a parallel what's happened here. Here we are all sitting here talking about protecting basic rights, which is, part of a strategy of the state. And I just want to thank the two lawyers that are here because obviously you have special skills that none of us have. And you're incredible for taking this on and helping. So I want to support your efforts in any way I can. I see there's kind of a note up here, which I'm trying to copy, of where we can send some money. So at least we can pay for the transcripts and all that stuff. And I think it's incredibly unfair, Eve, what's happened. And obviously the defending of basic civil liberties is really important, as people pointed out. So I really want to thank all of you for doing the work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for that comment. Tony, we'll go to you. I just asked you to unmute. Just ask you to unmute.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Okay, I put it in the chat. I'm just wondering if there's a way to look at these initial charges as and I forget what this acronym means. SLAPP, slap, right? Could these charges be regarded as a slap action by the police? And is there any anti-slap legislation in Canada or precedent in Canada to that could be brought to bear in argument, or imported from other jurisdictions, on a principled way say, I know New York State has some pretty good anti-SLAPP legislation in place that has been effective. So that's my question. SLAPP. Thanks.
I wouldn't mind answering that. So for those who don't know, SLAPPs are strategic litigation against public protests. And the classic example is when, McDonald's brings a lawsuit against some animal rights activists who are distributing flyers outside of its one of its restaurants. And, they have like this whole team of lawyers, and obviously, the activists don't have as much money or as many resources, and so then people stop criticizing the company because they can't fight these lawsuits. And so then this so-called anti-SLAPP legislation has been adopted, preventing that kind of lawsuit. So lawsuits that are brought by companies to intimidate protesters. And Quebec is one of these jurisdictions. We do have a rule preventing SLAPPs, and it's for civil cases, so for lawsuits that are brought. However, so in this particular case, for Eve's case, it's not a SLAPP. What the police did, they're not a company. So they're using the law, they're weaponizing the law against a protester, similar to what a SLAPP would be, but it's a bit different. What I can say is that although I wanted to respond to the comment, because I think even though it doesn't apply necessarily to Eve's case, but I am concerned about the criminal law being used to get around the anti-SLAPP laws in Canada, or in Quebec in particular. So what I mean by that is, even if companies now can't bring a lawsuit against protesters to suppress criticism, but what they're doing is they're calling the police and they're saying, oh, there's these protesters and they're interfering with my business. And then the police are like, for example, rushing to Indigo's defense, and they are charging protesters who are out in front of Indigo with various things, mischief, obstruction of police work, etc. And so basically the companies are getting the state to do their dirty business for them. And so it's kind of, using the criminal laws to accomplish the same thing as a SLAPP. And this is another example of how, this lawfare, they're doing it in very, creative ways. And so we have to be just as creative to push back and to make sure that there still is a space for criticizing Israel and for expressing opinions, political opinions.
Yeah, Eve?
Yeah, so when the charges, I should have said this, when the charges were abandoned in the summer, July, the Dahlia Kurtz charges, she then sued me and Roger Waters in civil court for defamation. My lawyers were in that case just submitted a response, and we are labeling it a SLAPP suit that Dahlia Kurtz has instigated and have it dismissed on those grounds. She's suing me for $400,000 now in defamation, and we have countersued, and we're asking for $10,000 for each day that I was jailed, so $50,000, and for her to cover the legal costs. But yeah, so that's an instance where, I mean, and I should have maybe mentioned this as well, is that Kurtz also brought charge or a complaint to the Barreau du Québec around John. She brought a complaint to the Senate Ethics Commission over Senator Wu defending me when I was jailed. So this is lawfare across the board. So criminal harassment, targeting my lawyer, then targeting a senator defending me. Then when the charges are thrown out, then she instigates a defamation suit in civil court. So I mean, this is and it's the lawyer Anil Oberman who is right at the center of this, and he has been involved in many cases in Montreal. He's the sort of leading lawfare lawyer in the city, and who knows where this is being funded from, right? Like I would be very surprised if all this is not being this isn't activism, right? This is some fund that's been set aside to pursue this kind of lawfare. And I can say in my defamation thing, I had a 5 hour examination with Neil Oberman and this other lawyer, Michael Hollander, recently. And I mean, this is costly stuff, right? So someone's funding this stuff. Yeah, so we have to understand a little bit of that kind of context as well. But definitely in the defamation suit, we have labeled it a slap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Even. I will just say that Barbara had to leave the other lawyer, just so everybody is aware. B. Sandhu?
Yeah.
I have to leave very soon myself.
Okay.
Okay, well then my question is directed to you. One is I've a couple of just technical issues. If you put aside the whole Palestine-Israel issue and just say, was it one of volume? In other words, as 5,000 letters as opposed to say 5? Because it's not unusual. Imagine if I'm caught for, I don't know, break-in entry, I got my rabbi, my school teacher, my whatever to write letters, 5 or 6 letters, right, to the cops or to whoever. So that versus say 5,000, and it was overwhelming to do their work. In which case, you call IT and just say put a block on this or do one swoop clean or something's possible. So is it the volume?
Yeah, it's based on volume, and it was kind of a harassment. All right. No, not harassment. That's the wrong word because it's a bit of a pain in the ass to get a lot of emails. That's not obstructing justice. That's not obstructing justice.
So I was just let me just finish this. So that of just the volume is too much to deal with. I can't do my other job and whatnot. The second would be the content. So if the content was such that is harassment, I mean, what if there was 5,000 letters that say, "Hey, we love the police, let Eve go"? Would that have qualified better? So volume, content, and the third is that. What's the, I'm kind of somewhat peripherally involved in the city where I live in with the police services board and so forth. And I cannot imagine that the top brass or the board are happy with this because this is, let's say it ends up going to the Supreme Court. This is not only just costly, the publicity you're going to get is not going to be positive. It's ridiculous on top of it. Is it perhaps the association? Was it the officer went to the association, the union, and they kind of pushed this become an issue? So what's your reading on that part?
All right. I don't think the officer went to the union. It would happen very quickly. She didn't like it. She got a lot of her emails, and her system apparently was deficient, and she had trouble getting her other emails or something, and so. Maybe for her, she didn't really like what getting those emails. That's her fault. She made a mistake. All right. She made a mistake. And by the way, it didn't really hurt her. And Eve was in jail for 5 days. So
no, I'm just thinking like on the letter writing campaign. One other thing I'm just thinking is that was so if it's not the volume, it's not the content, and it's not going to somewhere to the others.
It was volume. Volume was the fact that there were a lot of them was one of the reasons.
So in your opinion, does volume even matter? Like, so what if it's 5 letters versus 5,000 or versus 50,000? And related to that is this: the email that she gave, right? It's paid for by the public taxpayers and so forth. It's a public email, and I know sometimes when you
Not
receive
public.
early
It's
emails, it says, this content is not to be shared, but I don't think he shared the content. He just wrote something and it said, send it to this person.
Well,
Like, is that against the law? Like
no,
that,
of
that
course not. Of
a
course not. It's against
bureaucrat's email is public knowledge. I mean, I'm a former
it's not against
bureaucrat.
it's not
Yeah, we've
against
got,
the law at all. All right. Her address was not public. Eve got her address because I wrote her a letter and I CC'd Eve. So Eve got her address. But and I can even understand she didn't like it. I'm sorry.
yeah.
The letter said the truth. And even if they hadn't been completely right, they were honest attempts to tell the truth.
No, but
Okay.
let's say the letter was completely outlandish. The issue really here is she felt, quote unquote,
Well, that's
felt
not the issue here because Eve was.
because she. No, no, just one second. I know there's a deeper issue, but I'm saying is simply that she felt harassed by the volume of letters. Is that the sort of the bottom line?
I wouldn't. It's hard to generalize because let me say to you, I think it's wrong to send stupid letters to public officials. It just doesn't make sense, right? This was.
You'd be surprised. You got.
Hang on, no, sorry, I'm sorry. This was an honest attempt to convince a police officer to act legally. All right? That's specific to Eve. Is there a general? I have no idea. Okay? So let's move on to another question because these are partly red herrings. Although I mean the questions are important, but
Let me add to that. I mean, in the case, they did make this argument about numbers, but they never said a number, of course. They didn't say if it would have crossed 50, it then becomes harassment. If it was only 49, it's okay. They never said that. They did hone in on the question of numbers, but it wasn't defined. But the other side to this that I think uh, is kind of relevant is sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Uh, the two of the charges focus on a peace officer, so they suggest a police officer, but one of the charges of like indecent, violent communication, something to that effect, it's actually just general, right? So could apply that if I was to instigate an Action Network email campaign to, I don't know, let's say the person in charge of I don't know, like let's say liquor licenses at the city of Montreal, assuming that there's a person in charge of that, and you were to get people to email that person, right, in their work account. Like this was not the investigator's personal email account. This was a work account. This is SPVM account. If you were to email that, or for that matter, the mayor, you can define this according to this could be defined as like violent communication. It's not just most of the two of the three charges are focused on the police, and so they effectively undercut our ability to communicate with the police, or if you want to frame it, communicate with some pressure to the police, which in one way or another, every form of communication is arguably a form of pressure, whether it's one phone call or 4,000 emails. But okay, but it also goes off into just general any official, and that's in one of the things. So that has like really vast implications. Again, it's bad, very bad on the police front, but it also goes beyond just the police front. That like any mass email campaign of a public official at their work account can be defined as violent. I have the exact wording, communication. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We'll do Barry and then Hans, and we'll just ask you to keep the questions quite short, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. This case, this injustice that has been unfurled by the authorities in court um, is a threat to the rights of millions of people. But at the same time, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that it's a threat to the rights of Eve Engler as a spokesperson for broader movements for internationalism and anti-war policies and against injustices unfolding in the world. So I want to ask a question about Eve's own risks in the present situation. If the appeal is unsuccessful, what are the consequences in terms of jail time? What are the consequences in terms of extended appeals up to and including the Supreme Court? I think we need to be mindful of the fact that a spokesperson for progress and social justice is being threatened as well as everybody else by this unjust set of conditions and unjust charges that infringe on freedom of speech. Thank you.
I can answer about the penalty because if he's going to be there's a sentence hearing on the 4th of March, which we may have an agreement because on the face of it, it doesn't seem that serious. But there's a warning. I never discussed this with Eve. I'm telling my client about this now. Is I've seen some unreasonable sentences lately in my work, and so we have to be prepared to fight on that and go on appeal on that. I'm not going to predict because predicting is such a dangerous thing to do. If we lose in the Superior Court, which quite often the Superior Court gives fair hearings, in other words, that you're allowed to express yourself. I'm not saying it's good, but we do have a right to apply for leave to appeal to the Court of Appeal on a question of law, not a question of fact. And so if there's a legal issue which arises from the Superior Court judgment, we can apply to go to the Court of Appeal. And this is the kind of case, well, depend what the Superior Court says, what they say, but it could go to the Court of Appeal and then eventually to the Supreme Court. It's hard to predict. I'm predicting such a stupid thing to do for a lawyer. But anyway, my prediction is that it won't go to the Court of Appeal even. But, I could be wrong completely, So, because we're living in a difficult climate, But for Eve, it's not a good thing to have a criminal record. And by the way, you're labeled. When if he gets arrested again, he's labeled for that, and they'll remember who he is. I think they know who Eve is anyway, but still, it's wrong. He did nothing wrong. Okay.
Absolutely. But can you tell us what the potential penalty is? I think we should be aware of it.
Well, penalties is 6 months in jail, but that's a legal question. It's a summary charge. I think it's 6 months in jail. Okay, max. Didn't even look that up because it changes from time to time, but he's not going to get that. All right. And he can get a fine and he can get probation. I mean, what if he got a probation order to keep the peace and they tried to shut him up? Well, that's wrong, right? Eve's an active person in Canadian politics now. And so his voice is important. The things we're talking about are important. So
very important.
Yeah. And so I'm sorry I didn't answer the exact question of what the sentence possibly is. I didn't look it up, but I think it's 6 months. Could be a year. They changed the law on it recently, but we're not looking at that. We don't want a conviction. We don't want,
no.
Yeah, thank you.
Lalud, continue.
Hans?
Hey, I'm one of those people that sent an email, one of those 4,000. Indirectly, my rights to do so is being infringed upon. And I've raised this question in the chat. Can we not, as senders of these emails, make a class action on the basis that our rights to send these emails is being infringed upon? Why, supposedly, does the public official have special rights? If police people have special rights in the state, are we not one step closer to a police state? So why is Eve being crucified when we are the people that exercised our rights to send an email to protest what happened to him.
Well,
Can we make a class action is my question.
no, the
And
answer
I
is
would be willing to support that.
I don't think you have a right to class action because it's a ruling, not an action done by somebody. I don't think it's a class action. But your point is valid. And the judge, I don't agree with what the judge said because she took all these people had to do is sign. And that implies that you're a stupid fool, right? You just follow Eve stupidly. That's what it comes down to. But people who saw it, I bet there's some people who saw it who didn't sign because they didn't agree with what Eve said. I don't know. You know, it's not automatic. So you signed it, you thought about it, and you signed it. You deserve respect. And we're going to mention that, and that's part of our appeal. We're mentioning that the judge erred on that issue. All right. You want to add something to that, Eve? No.
Okay, thank you. John has informed us that he has to go, and I want to respect his time. So thank you so much for coming on to this webinar and answering our questions and fighting for Eve. Sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions tonight, but I think it was a really important webinar. And yeah, we'll be interested to see what happens on I think March 4th, you said.
Yeah, nothing might happen. We don't know whether we're going to have a deal, or whether we're going to have to argue it. I don't know. I have no idea. Because I could make a deal. If they gave him a probation order, we might agree. I don't know. I never talked about to my client about that yet.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world, but we have to be careful. Thank you, Bye.
Okay, thank you. Eve, did you want to say anything before we head out?
No. If anyone else have quick questions, I'm happy to also answer the best I can. But I'm also, I have two children and stuff like that, so happy to do that too. But yeah, I think that the big picture case here, to me, there is a Zionist lawfare. That is the central. That's what unleashed this whole thing. And then my assessment is this is the Montreal police, specifically some investigators that basically didn't like the fact that there was a challenge to their authority, and they use the fact that they are the law in a sense to double down on the error they made. I mean, it was clearly an error of legal judgment to impose the condition, which a judge ultimately threw out, and it was an error to move forward with the charges on Dahlia Kurtz, which they eventually abandoned. And I think that the Montreal police investigators, they don't like everyone. I mean, if you do something wrong at your work, you don't want lots of people emailing you or complaining, or you know what I mean? Like, if I think that would be the case for anyone who doesn't want to be exposed in doing something, especially where it was framed as sort of on behalf of lawfare, on behalf of genocide. I can understand why a police investigator wouldn't like that, but they're basically using this power they have to double down on the error they made, and of course, it seemed outlandish that the judge would find me guilty on this, but they have, and we'll see what happens with the appeal and obviously the sentencing as well.
Yeah, okay, so we did have two people that wanted to ask questions from before, so maybe we'll just do both of them at the same time and then you can respond to both. So Richard, if you wanted to ask your question quickly, and then Diane, and then that will be it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to explain that I happen to be a lawyer myself, and I've been following this case very closely. And during summations, the Crown prosecutor literally admitted that they were not ready to authorize charges at the moment they arrested Mr. Engler. They hadn't decided yet. They were waiting for this complimentary report. It was that complimentary report that caused them to drop the charges. The reason they authorized the charges because Mr. Engler did not accept the condition, and so the police decided to keep him in detention and force him to be. And so the Crown had to had 5 hours to decide to authorize the charge so that the conditions could be imposed upon him in the context of a appearance in custody. So the Crown authorized without being sure. In fact, the prosecutor said, but for Eve Engler's decision to not cooperate, he would never have been charged. He would have agreed to the condition. It would have waited until October, which would have been his first appearance. And in October, he would have learned that the charges were not authorized, and his conditions would have died at that moment. So you could see there's a serious problem here because, effectively, they admitted that they weren't sure that they didn't consider that they had a case against him at the moment they authorized the charge, and they considered it was perfectly normal. The other things I noticed was that the judge, as a fact, found the email to be, quote, intimidating, which is a factual finding that must be challenged at Superior Court, given that this is a reason why it was found that it was a harassing communications, and that the goal of Mr. Engler in terms of the obstruction of justice was to harass the police officer into dropping the case. In fact, what happened is that though the judge refused to apply what's called the tendency test in terms of obstruction of justice, which is another mistake that was made here. There's a lot of another problem was the judge essentially ruled that the article that was attached to the email petition was full of inaccuracies, such that the people who sent emails were completely stupid and ignorant about the foundation behind the Kurtz case, when in fact he explained very clearly why he considered that he was not guilty of criminal harassment. You don't need to be a trained lawyer to claim your innocence in public. And in fact, the factual findings about that should also be challenged also in an appeal. These are just some of my opinions that I have about this case, and that this case is actually quite a bit worse than a lot of people really think it is, and that it's eminently political. Because I can't help but think that, but for the fact that he spoke of Zionist lawfare and genocide, the email would not have been ruled to be intimidating, and his article would not have been deemed to be some kind of ignorant radical rant that induced a bunch of people in error and made them stupidly act like automatons for Mr. Engler in sending emails to the police officer. So these are some of my observations and comments about this case. If anybody has anything to say about my comments, please, you may if you wish.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, we'll go on to the next question, then Eve can respond to both. So, Diane.
I just have a really quick question just about if I'm at a rally and I've heard this and other rallies that I've seen on the net and stuff, if you're chanting death, death to the IDF, is that illegal? I mean, NECAP has been leading people in, concerts and stuff.
I can't answer that fully. I don't think it is. I believe NECAP got off on the targeting around that, but I can't answer that with a high level of confidence. I guess I would just say thanks, Richard, in terms of what you've stated. I agree with you that this case is imminently political. There was some wild leaps of logic and acceptance by the judge, where they basically, John kind of sort of alluded to it, and you kind of alluded to it as well. They just basically assume that everyone is like just a sheep. They were just my sheep, and I asked people to email, and everyone just had to do it. And I don't know, was some sort of special electromagnetic wave that was delivered to everyone or something. Obviously, people made their personal decision. I presume there were many more people that saw the action alert that didn't take action than did take action, which would be normal with action alerts. I've done action alerts, probably either the main instigator or a contributor 100 times. We have done action alerts to police officials in the past around the Foreign Enlistment Act. It was higher up the chain, the RCMP commissioner we've done, and I believe we did another police official in the past. So this is not like there was a lot that this judge just sort of accepted from the police department. It from A to Z, the whole thing just comes across as absurd. The condition is dropped. the charges dropped, but those calling for that to happen, or specifically one person calling on others to message about that gets charged. I mean, like why aren't all 4,000 people charged? Or I'm sure there's people who shared the action alert, right? It wasn't only me that promoted the action alert. Action alert itself has a mechanism of sharing it to your Facebook, sharing it to your Twitter. So okay, if it's not everyone who emailed the police, then it should be everyone who shared the action alert, right, and got one plus themselves plus one or many to take action, right? Like, where is the threshold and all that? To a large extent, Action Network was put on trial, and the judge basically found that this petition writing technology can be criminal if it's targeting the Montreal police at least. And again, the if you look at the email, it started with dear and ended with sincerely. There was nothing in the vicinity of aggressive or violent or threatening communication. The police officer coming in and saying they felt like threatened by this is just obviously hyperbolic. I mean, this is somebody who has a gun. This is somebody, who is, part of a police department supposed to be like dealing with like big, I don't know, criminal networks where people are accused of murder and accused of, I don't know, different drug-related crimes or whatever, right? So this is, it just doesn't add up, but the judge completely bought what the police were putting forward. What the police were claiming seemed, I thought they were going to drop all the I thought they were going to abandon the charges before we ever went before a judge, right? Especially after they abandoned the Dahlia Kurtz charge. I just assumed they were going to abandon the other ones because it was just on the face of it doesn't make sense. But they pushed forward and they succeeded. So.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like Richard just wants to respond to one thing and then we're going to wrap it up. So if just really quickly, please.
Oh, I didn't know that I wanted to respond to anything.
Oh.
I was just simply saying that just thought someone wanted me to say something else about this. As I said, they're questions of fact that have to be attacked because and it's completely political because essentially in the email, Eve Engler suggests that Shorty says to her, "Don't fall for these people. These people practice lawfare and all this. Don't fall for it." And it's like, but there was the implication that you're suggesting that if you go ahead, you're supporting pro-genocide people. Oh my gosh, it means that a whole what, and also it makes Mr. Engler seem like a cult leader with all these crazy followers who follow nonsense, who will zombie-like will go and I don't know, storm the police station and devour everybody inside or something. It's like the politics itself is put into question. If it was different politics, if it was about, I don't know, if it was a pro-Zionist letters, I don't think that the judge would have found it to be, quote, intimidating. It would have been considered to be a completely acceptable form of politics and argument to also present to the readers in terms of the article that led people to the petition, which is why attacking the factual findings, because a real objectively, without being a Zionist, without being without saying that it's a complete evil crime to accuse them of supporting genocide, a truly objective person would look at it and say, no, it is not intimidating. It is not an intimidating message. It was not designed to be intimidating. But that factual finding is one of the factual findings that underpins everything, and that must be attacked.
And just what I was joking with to conclude here, it wouldn't at all surprise me. So the Montreal Hate Crimes Unit was set up in 2016. There's stories out there from I think 2021 I saw where B'nai B'rith, or I think it was B'nai B'rith, was pressuring for more resources to be given to the Montreal Hate Crimes Unit. It's the hate crimes unit that brings the charge against me around this harassing Dahlia Kurtz. It wouldn't at all surprise me to find out that in 2021 or at some point in the process, some of the Zionist groups organized a email petition campaign calling on the Montreal the SPVM to either establish the hate crimes unit or to increase the size of the hate crimes unit. And I just think that would be quite ironic if we could prove through access to information that there was an email petition campaign that played some role in either establishing or boosting the hate crimes unit, and then they go and say, well, this email petition campaign is a threat and is dangerous and whatnot. Yeah, anyways, leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to this webinar tonight. It'll be posted on the Capitalism Can't Be Fixed YouTube channel, as well as probably Eve's channels as well. Yeah, and we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, everyone.